Well, to answer all your coronavirus questions, we have a very special guest with us today. Joining us now is America's doctor and host of the Dr. Oz Show, Dr. Mehmet Oz. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. Let me ask you, we've seen a lot of talk about coronavirus. How dangerous do you consider this?
I don't think the virus is dangerous for the vast majority of Americans, especially if you don't have a chronic medical condition. There are some populations, however, who are at risk. If you're over the age of 60, and you have a cardiovascular history, if you have passage of cancer, if your lungs are diseased, or you're a current smoker or vapor, that population is at increased risk based on the Chinese CDC data. But in this country, we don't know yet. My optimistic belief is that we'll continue to see very little illness in children. In fact, there's no reported deaths in children around the world under the age of 10. Thank goodness. From ages 10 till 50, it's a 0.2% risk of dying if you contract the virus, which is twice what the flu virus is. And so it's not that much of a difference. And no one, people don't get the flu vaccine, so they're not that worried about the flu, obviously. So I don't think there's reason for that audience to panic. But if you're 80 years old and you've had a couple stints in your heart and you're diabetic and hypertensive and you're going through chemotherapy and you're in a bad lung, why worry about it?
So are you advising people not to go to the ball game, not to go to restaurants, not to travel? What recommendations are you giving them?
I don't like people making decisions based in fear, period. It's also applicable if you've got a contagious virus going around. So if you're young and healthy and don't have any chronic illnesses, I'd go to the ball game, take the subway, travel in an airplane, do what you want to do. Because if you get the virus, 80% of the time it's going to be a mild, I'm going to say relatively trivial experience. And the people who have more of an issue are usually treated successfully. But if you're older with chronic illnesses, I think it's a good time to pull back.
Do you think it's spreading more quickly than the seasonal flu? How do you compare it to the seasonal flu?
Oh, we know it's more contagious than the seasonal flu. It's not even close. If I have the seasonal flu, I'll pass it to about 9 people in a week. If I have the coronavirus, I'll pass it to 45 people in a week. So it's a lot more infectious, much bigger problem. And for that reason, public health officials get concerned. Because when you get a virus spreads that quickly through a population, some people are going to get hurt. And I got to say, everyone's worried about whether they call this a pandemic or not. It doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is it's an endemic virus, which means it's going to be in our species. It's not going away like SARS did. And so we're going to see it again in the winter, next winter, the one after that. It's going to take us about a year to 18 months to get a vaccine. So we're going to have to deal with the virus as it currently is. And I'm sure we'll do fine with it where it can do people. We've always been able to fight, come together and fight battles, whether it's mobilizing for war or dealing with the Cold War or whatever else is faced in front of us. We just need clear action steps as a people to follow, and we'll do our jobs as citizens as the government figures out how to get out the right testing devices and the medical community figures out how to get the right number of ventilators in hospitals. All that's got to happen at the same time.
Well, let's take a look at some of the advice you give to folks. You have a coronavirus survival protocol guide that I'm showing the folks, and I'm sure you can make this available, or we will. But let's talk a little bit about the hygiene. Can you give some recommendations as far as how people should be taking care of themselves now, especially related to coronavirus?
I will. That one sheet, by the way, is on all my Dr. Oz social sites. It's on droz.com. It's on the Newsmax website. So people should pull it down, share it with their friends. I did not make up this information. I've been surveying and interviewing all the great leaders who are knowledgeable in the area. This is their best advice. So as an example, hand washing and how their hygiene tactics are effective, but you got to do it the right way. So how does a surgeon, I'm a surgeon, wash their hands? They don't just go like this and hope it works out. You literally have to get your fingers clean. So you got to twist your fingers inside your palm, get the thumbs separately, each of the individuals. This is called greasing the palm. Get the fingertips clean. So when they touch your face, which you do dozens of times an hour, then you'll be relatively safe from a virus that you may have touched on the table in front of you getting into your eye, which is often how this virus is passed. That's why it's so contagious. It lives a long time on solid surfaces like tabletops and desks. So if you can keep your fingers clean, even if the desk is dirty, you'll be okay. Speaking of the desk, clean it. But don't just quickly dab it with a wipe. You want to spray it if you can and give it a minute or two to dry. That drying process allows the material to work on the virus particles and kill them. And if you can do those two things alone, you'll hugely benefit yourself, probably half the chance of getting the infection. Then in addition to that, add on the things like a humidifier, because the virus doesn't like humid weather. Make sure that you've got a HEPA filter in your air purification system. That clears out a lot of the viruses. Planes have that, by the way, which is why I'm less worried about planes than other places.
And you say handshakes are canceled. So what would you replace them with?
Well, it's been studied. If you high five, which people probably won't do anyway, you have the chance that you'll get a viral transmission. If you fist bump, that's about 1/10 the chance of passing a virus along compared to a firm handshake. I personally like the elbow bump, which you can do without too much awkwardness. People appreciate you trying to show your affection for them, but you're not going to risk contaminating them with anything you may have caught and vice versa.
You know, the one thing I notice about when you do the elbow bump, your faces are actually closer to each other than shaking hands. So where does the infection come from?
Well, there's a debate. The CDC keeps saying that much of it's aerosolized as we breathe into each other's faces, but a lot of the experts I've spoken to argue that it's because people touch surfaces and spread viruses directly, and then we pick up the virus from that surface. It's probably going to be both. And you know, you're right. If you get cuddle up close and touch elbows, that's a problem. But I do try to look away and go like this. The nice thing about this move is that your elbow can touch any part of their body, and there's no direct contamination of your skin. A fist bump, if you don't look carefully and watch it, you'll bang knuckles, and it actually hurts.
Yeah. When it comes to cleaning surfaces, what's the alcohol content you need in order to be effective?
Well, 60% for hand sanitizers, but the products that work on surfaces aren't just alcohol-based. There are other chemicals in them. And they're approved by the CDC for use against coronavirus. It wasn't tested against this strain, but in the past, they were checked against MERS and SARS, and they were proven effective. Many of them have Clorox-type material bleaches in them. So they're different products, but they've been looked at, and they seem to work. So spray them on and give it some time.